He was supposed to come back a hero. That's what they told me before we left Pyongyang. That we were selected, trained, and trusted the future of the Republic. But the man standing next to me on that tarmac in Moscow, the one who shook my hand before boarding the train to St. Petersburg, never came back. And when I asked about him, they told me he never existed. They erased him. And now, they're trying to erase me too. It started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to hear, a message I wasn't meant to read, and a name I should have forgotten. But I didn't. I couldn't. 3 months after that day, I was hiding in the back of a freezer truck outside Ulaanbaatar, wrapped in a stolen construction jacket, holding a fake Vietnamese passport soaked in melted ice. There was a time when I believed in the mission, when I thought we were building something sacred. But something inside me shattered the moment his name was deleted. Now I ask myself the same question every night. If they could make a person disappear without a trace even from inside another country, how safe was I really? He left to serve, but came back with questions no one wanted answered. Me? I never made it back. And this is the reason why. My name was never meant to be known outside the walls of Pyongyang. I wasn't a celebrity, nor a general's son, but I belonged to a class. Most North Koreans only heard rumors about the trusted ones. My father was a mid-level manager in the Ministry of Foreign Trade. Not powerful, but compliant enough to stay safe. He knew how to say yes without asking questions. That made him valuable. We lived in a high-rise in the Mangyongdae district, where the power rarely went out, and the stairwells smelled of imported disinfectant. My school uniform was tailored. My shoes came from China. My lunch sometimes had meat. It wasn't luxury by foreign standards, but in North Korea, we were practically elite. I was good at languages. Russian came easily to me. I used to mimic the old Soviet phrases my father picked up from business trips. At 15, I was sent to Pyongyang University of Foreign Studies, the pipeline for diplomats and trade envoys. That's where I met Kang Jun-seok. He was sharper than me, quicker with words, and more loyal than most. We weren't friends at first, but after 2 years of training together we became inseparable. When the selection came, we both passed a special scholarship program. They called it a high-level exchange with a Russian institute in Moscow, under the direct approval of the Foreign Affairs Committee. Not many details were given. We were told only that it was an honor, that it was our duty, and that we would be representing the purity and strength of the Democratic People's Republic. Before leaving, we were summoned to a closed-door seminar, 4 hours in a bare concrete room with portraits of Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and the marshal himself watching us. We signed something called the Commitment of Devotion. It sounded poetic, but it was an oath to report any and all contact with foreigners, to avoid ideological pollution, to observe each other, and report any deviations. They smiled when we signed it, like parents sending sons off to war. Back then, I was proud. I told myself that this was the reward for years of obedience and hard work. I believed we were being sent to Moscow, not to study, but to serve, to prove that our country produced men of discipline, precision, and incorruptible thought. But I didn't know that the greatest threat wasn't corruption, it was forgetting the script. And that one day, remembering the wrong person, could cost me everything. The air in Moscow was heavy with smoke and metal, like a city still catching its breath after a century of revolutions. I had never seen buildings so tall, streets so wide, or faces so indifferent, but I didn't feel lost. I felt important. They housed us in a gray, rectangular dormitory outside the main university campus. It was clean, warm, and watched. We had our own floor, restricted access, and daily check-ins with a man from the embassy who never gave his name. Each morning, we were escorted to class by a liaison who always wore the same brown jacket and pretended not to understand Korean. I was focused. I studied hard, took notes in Cyrillic, memorized speeches about bilateral trade and socialist solidarity. Jun-sok excelled faster. His Russian was flawless. Within 2 months, professors praised him. He laughed it off, saying, "That's why they sent us to impress, not to learn." But it wasn't all work. On Sundays, we walked to the corner bakery where an old Uzbek woman sold sweet bread for a few rubles. Jun-sok would buy 2 and save 1 for later, in case the revolution starts. He'd joke. We played chess in the park when it wasn't snowing. We watched Russian news together, pointing out the propaganda like it was a game. We even kept a notebook of forbidden thoughts, things we would never dare say back home, but here, felt just out of reach. Despite the rules, the cameras, the curfews, it felt freer than anything I'd known. Still, we were careful. Every call home was scripted. Every email was approved. Every face outside the program was a potential threat. Or worse, a test. Looking back, I wonder if we let our guard down too easily. If we mistook the cold for safety. The last normal memory I have of Jun-seok is him standing at the train station, waving at a girl in a red scarf. He smiled at me afterward, embarrassed. "Just Russian curiosity," he said. "I'm still yours, comrade." I laughed. I didn't know it would be the last time. The next day, he was gone. The bed was made. His books were gone. His toothbrush was missing from the sink. At first, I thought he'd left for class early. But when he didn't show up for lunch, I asked our handler, the man in the brown jacket. He looked confused. "Who?" I repeated the name. "Kang Jun-sok. My roommate." He tilted his head and said calmly, "There is no such person in this program." I laughed. I thought it was a mistake. A stupid joke. But, when I returned to our room, something was off. Our shared notebook, the one filled with jokes and quiet rebellion, was gone. My drawer had been rearranged. Our group photo, in front of the Kremlin, the one we took last week, was missing Jun-sok. He was simply not in the picture. I ran to the university's administration office. I asked to see the student roster. His name wasn't there. Not in class lists. Not in the dorm registry. Not in any of the official records. I emailed one of our professors, asking if he'd seen him. No reply. When I went to the embassy to inquire, the receptionist looked uncomfortable. She told me, in a whisper, "You should stop asking about him." That night, I searched my hard drive for a photo of us together. I found one blurry, but unmistakably him, standing beside me in our dorm room, flashing a mock salute. I tried to print it, but the machine jammed halfway through. I pulled the page out with trembling hands. His face was smudged with static. The next morning, I found my own name missing from the attendance sheet. A week later, someone entered our room while I was at class. My drawers were ransacked. My laptop had been powered on, left open to an empty Word document titled Declaration. I never wrote it. A sealed envelope appeared under my pillow that night. Inside was a one-way train ticket to Pyongyang. Departure. 2 days later. No explanation. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I stared at the walls and tried to remember the sound of Jun-sok's voice. But it was fading, like a dream slipping through my hands. Was he dead? Was he sent back? Was he turned? I wanted to believe there was an innocent reason. Maybe a medical emergency. Maybe a family tragedy. But deep down, I knew the truth. We had crossed a line we weren't supposed to cross. Not by talking to foreigners. Not by spreading anti-government lies. No. We crossed the line by asking the wrong questions and remembering the wrong names. I considered going back. Taking the train. Letting it end the way they wanted. But then I found it, the last breadcrumb. A note, handwritten in Korean, stuffed behind our radiator. 4 words. "Don't trust the mirror." It was his handwriting. I was sure of it. The mirror above our desk? I smashed it. Behind the glass, hidden in the frame, was a micro SD card taped to the wood. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. Inside were video clips. Recordings of our lectures. of surveillance in our dorm, of whispered conversations from embassy corridors, and at the end a video of Junseok speaking directly to camera in a hushed voice. If you're seeing this, it means I didn't make it. They're watching you now. Run. That was the moment I knew. If I stayed another day, I would vanish too. The decision wasn't sudden. It arrived slowly, like frost creeping over a window, quiet, inevitable. I watched it spread with every glance over my shoulder, every shadow that lingered too long in the hallway. After I found the video, I packed in silence. Only what I could carry. A change of clothes. Cash I had been stashing for months. The micro SD card. And my passport, the real one, issued by Pyongyang. Useless now. Worse than useless. A target. I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't go through the embassy. Every exit in the official system would lead me straight into their hands. I had to become invisible. And for that, I needed a new name. There was a Vietnamese construction crew working on an apartment complex near our dormitory. They lived in shipping containers, paid in cash, unregistered. One of their supervisors, a wiry man with broken Russian, had once sold me a SIM card under the table. I went to him. I need to disappear, I said. Not to defect. Just to go south. He didn't ask questions. Maybe he'd seen this before. 2 nights later, I was crammed in the back of a delivery truck, carrying frozen meats across the Belarus border. My new identity, Nguyen Van Long, Vietnamese electrician. My new documents, a forged passport, with a photograph slightly too grainy to examine closely. From Minsk, I took a bus to Kyiv. Then, a truck to Odessa. Every step took me farther from Pyongyang, but closer to exposure. I avoided cameras, spoke little, slept in laundromats and basements. The fear never left, not even in dreams. In Ukraine, I contacted a smuggler, not for weapons or drugs, for names. I needed a contact who could get me into China. He looked at me and said, "China is dangerous. They send people like you back." "I don't plan to stay," I told him. He gave me a phone number. A woman answered. She spoke perfect Mandarin. She asked where I was from. "Korea," I said. "South?" she asked. There was a pause. Then I said, "Not yet." 3 days later, I met her in a rural train station near Korgos, on the Kazakh-Chinese border. She gave me clean clothes, a burner phone, and a plan. I would cross into Xinjiang through the mountains. Then, if lucky, reach Urumqi. From there, move south quietly until I could find a safe passage out. Luck ran out on day 2. A patrol spotted our group. 3 others were with me. A Uyghur man fleeing surveillance, and a Chinese girl trying to reunite with her family in Malaysia. The girl twisted her ankle during the descent. The man told us to leave her. I refused. We carried her for miles, taking turns. By the time we reached a road we hadn't eaten in 2 days, a truck driver picked us up. He didn't speak, just pointed south. We rode in silence. I stared at the landscape, barren, beautiful, alien. In Lanzhou, we parted ways. I never saw the girl again. In Kunming, I made contact with a broker connected to a Christian underground network. They operated safe houses for North Korean defectors. Most of them were women trafficked from the Northeast. I wasn't their usual case, but when I showed them the SD card and told them what I had seen, they took me in. For 2 weeks, I lived in a room above a noodle shop, hidden behind a false wall. During the day, I helped wash dishes. At night, I studied a map of Mongolia. Mongolia was one of the few places where the South Korean embassy had a history of accepting defectors. But the route was deadly. Desert, smugglers, wolves, and the ever-present risk of capture by Chinese authorities, who would send me straight back to Pyongyang or worse, make me vanish like Junseok. Still, I had no choice. The network found a driver. He would take me within 5 kilometers of the Mongolian border. After that, I would walk. It was February. The Gobi was a sheet of white nothingness, with winds like knives and a sky that never moved. I had a coat 3 sizes too big, boots stuffed with newspaper, and a bottle of water frozen solid. I walked for 9 hours. The only thing that kept me upright was the memory of my friend's voice. Run. At dawn, I stumbled across the border. There were no signs, no fences, only emptiness. I collapsed beneath a withered tree, thinking it was the last thing I would ever see, but it wasn't. A patrol found me. Mongolian soldiers. They didn't speak Korean, but they offered me water. One of them had a South Korean phone. I will never forget the sound of Hangul spoken freely, without fear. Within a week, I was transferred to Ulaanbaatar. I spent 3 days under questioning, then another 10 waiting in limbo. And then, it came the confirmation. Seoul was willing to take me. They asked for my name. I gave them a different one. Then I handed them the SD card. Seoul was loud in a way I had never known. Not just the traffic, or the neon signs, or the endless voices rising from street vendors and subway speakers. It was loud with freedom, the kind of noise that didn't ask permission to exist. They took me first to Hanawan, the government-run resettlement center for defectors. The building was clean, quiet, and filled with people who looked like me but no longer acted like me. Girls who wore jeans and curled their hair. Men who talked with their hands, laughed openly, cried without shame. My first night there, I couldn't sleep. The lights stayed on longer than they should have, and the silence between rooms was unnatural. I kept expecting someone to knock on the door and call me to a midnight interrogation. I kept waiting for my name to vanish again. The next morning, they gave me a phone. I held it like a bomb. It was my first time touching one freely. No restrictions, no filters, just a rectangle of glass and infinite possibilities. They showed me how to connect to Wi-Fi. They showed me Google. I typed North Korea. My hands shook. There were articles, images, leaked footage, survivor stories, diagrams of concentration camps. A world that had been invisible to me for 23 years now spilled out in full color. One video in particular showed a man who looked like my old professor, the one who told me loyalty was worth more than life, enjoying wine at a diplomatic banquet in Geneva. I stared at the screen for hours. At Hanawan, they taught us about democracy, about laws and rights, about how to open a bank account and apply for housing. But none of that felt real. What felt real was the smell of instant ramen in the hallway, the sound of children laughing, the fact that no one ever asked where I had come from, only where I wanted to go next. Still, I wasn't free. Not really. Every night, I had the same dream. I was back in Moscow, sitting across from Junsok, playing chess. He would move his knight, smile, and say, "Your turn." But when I looked down, the board was blank. No pieces, no game, just silence. In my waking hours, I tried to build a new life. I took language classes, found a part-time job at a bookstore. I kept my head low, my speech polite, my movements minimal, but I never stopped looking behind me. I changed phones 3 times, avoided North Korean neighborhoods, never used my real name. And I never told anyone about the video, not even the officers who processed my asylum. Why? Because even here, in the land of light and freedom, I knew the shadow could still reach. One day, I received an anonymous message on my second phone. Just 4 words, in Russian. On больше не дышит. He no longer breathes. No name. No context. Just that. I stared at it for hours. Was it a threat? A warning? Or a confirmation? I never found out. But in that moment, I realized something. Even if I was safe now, I would never truly escape. Not from the memory, not from the silence, Not from the face of the boy who once stood beside me in the cold, holding a chess piece like a secret weapon. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had just boarded the train. If I had returned to Pyongyang, surrendered my memories, and resumed the life they chose for me. Maybe I'd be working in the Ministry of Trade by now. Smiling, saluting, forgetting. But every time that thought crosses my mind, I remember his face. Jun Seok had a habit of humming when he studied old revolutionary songs we both pretended to believe in. He always lost at chess, but refused to play anything else. Simple games reveal deeper minds, he used to say, grinning like a fool. The last words I ever heard him say were muffled through a closed bathroom door. "I'll be out in a minute." He never came out. They say memory fades. But in my case, it sharpens. It loops. It replays. His smile on the train platform. His name on the attendance sheet. His signature in our notebook. Gone. 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 But not from me. I live in a small apartment outside Seoul now. I work at a bookstore. I drink instant coffee. Some days, I don't speak at all. Some nights, I watch the sky and wonder if he ever got to do the same without fear. I once asked myself, was it worth it? Leaving everything, losing everyone, living as a ghost in a world I barely understand. The answer changes daily. But there's one thing I know for certain. They erased him from the records, the rosters, and the official memory of a nation. But they didn't erase him from me, and as long as I'm breathing, he exists. He left to serve. I left to remember. And this is what remembering costs.